How do you want your students to act in your classroom? Well, maybe a better question is, what are you willing to accept as behavior in your classroom?
Hey, as long as they're not hurting anybody.
Here's the reality. 90% of your students will not only push the boundaries, they will cross those boundaries if you allow them to. There's this quote I heard, and man, I love this quote, and it's one of the things I'm starting to live by in my classroom. It goes like this. Culture is not created by the things that we celebrate. Culture is created by the things that we tolerate. I love it. I'm going to say it one more time. Culture is not created by the things that we celebrate. Culture is created by the things that we tolerate. So the question then becomes, what are you going to, or what are you tolerating in your classroom? So with that quote in mind, you really have to take a step back and think about your own class. Now, I know how it is. Oh man, sometimes these students will just wear me down. And there have been so many times where I was in the back of the classroom just looking at my watch. And I'm thinking, all right, I got 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes, $5 more. 5 more minutes, $5 more, right? Or if I hang in there for another 10 minutes, I get myself a Starbucks. Just hang in there, just hang in there. And I'm just counting down the minutes because these kids are just wearing me out. I know that feeling. And there's times when you're at that point and something's going on in class and you're like, I just don't got the energy to deal with it. I just don't have it in me to deal with it right now. And by doing that, you're allowing that behavior to continue. You are tolerating that behavior. What the reason is, I'm totally exhausted, I'm worn out, just don't have it in me, it's not worth the fight, but you're tolerating behavior. And what you're gonna find over time, if you do that long enough, students are gonna pick up on that, and they're gonna find the culture of your classroom coming down, because students are gonna realize that you're tolerating behavior to a point that you just can't fight it anymore. So keep that thought in mind, that if you really want a good culture in class, it's not what you're celebrating, it's what you're tolerating. And as soon as students cross that line, you got to call them. And no matter where you're at in the day, how exhausted you are, you got to call them out. Because if you don't, you're going to see the culture deteriorate. So the first thing you got to do is just really think about every second of your class. Because in your classroom, there's many different things going on. There's many different, for example, just in the first 5 minutes of class, I remember I was observing another teacher. He's actually a student teacher. He's kind of come to class a little bit. And I was observing him. And I realized in the first 5 minutes of class, there are so many things going on. You got students coming into the class. You got students coming in late. You got students coming in messing around. You got students coming in that aren't prepared. You got students coming in and they're not sitting down. You got kids that actually are sitting down but they aren't working. A kid forgot a pencil, and I left my book somewhere else. I have to use the restroom. I'm not feeling good. Oh, what else is there? What are we supposed to do? Hey, my book is missing. I have no paper. Man, listen, and then that's just from the students, and then you have the other things, right? You got to take attendance. You got to make sure everybody's here. You got to make sure your lesson. You got all these things going on. In the first 5 minutes, you probably have 20, 30 decisions to make. It can quickly become overwhelming. So before you even get into that situation, find some quiet time. Really think to yourself, what are the standards I'm going to set? What am I going to tolerate from every moment of my class? From the moment kids come into my class, how do I want them to come in? What are they going to do? Where are they going to put their backpack? What happens if they don't have a pencil or paper? You got to think about all that. You got to think it all the way through. And then actually during your class, you got to think to yourself, how do I want my students to be? Not only how do I want to be, what am I going to accept? Am I going to accept them talking the way I'm talking? Am I going to accept them not working? Am I going to accept them messing around why they should be working? What are you going to accept? And then when it comes time for you lecturing, what are you going to expect? Do they have to, all kids have to be quiet while you're talking, or just some? If you're trying to get there, every aspects of that you're going to have to think about. I created a course on classroom management called 20-Day Classroom Transformation. And the first thing I do is I have a worksheet where it has maybe like 20 or 30 different things on it that you're supposed to go through and kind of just rate yourself and just think to yourself, how do I want my class, or how do I want my class to be during these moments in time, and why these students are doing these different activities. And so and by the way, if you want that course, I believe I'll put it down in the link below in the description. Just feel free to click on that one. and you can find that resource in there. But just think to yourself, how is my class going to be, or how do I want it to be ran? And then once you have that on lock, once you really thought all the way through, and to be honest with you, there are things that come up you never even planned for, but through the years and through everything else, you're going to think about that, incorporate that into your routine. But once you know exactly what you want, then you're ready to take it to the next step. And the next step is this. Now that you know what your expectations are, you're going to have to hold students to that. You're going to have to be able to communicate it to them, which isn't hard. But more importantly than communicating to them, and tell me this isn't true, kids do not respond to what you say, they respond to what you do. I can tell my students when I'm talking, you need to be quiet. But if they are talking, while I'm talking, I do nothing about it, what was the point of me even saying it? They respond to what we do. They're always going to be pushing those boundaries and seeing how far they can get. And if we don't set that boundary and we don't push back, then they're going to cross the line more often than not. So once you know what your expectations are, now you have to hold kids to that. And the way you go about that is systematically, the way you go about it is you got to think through as well all the consequences you're going to issue and how you're going to issue those consequences and how you're going to respond to a student if they say one thing or another. It's a lot of information. Trust me, it's a lot of information. It's 20 years all trying to boil down to this one video, so I get it. But trust me on this, you need to take the time to do that. And if you set those clear expectations and you start holding students to those clear expectations and you follow through with that, you're going to see a classroom that you're going to enjoy coming to every single day.